Trump has said some disturbing things, which is par for the course. Let's have a look.
Why don't we throw up two clips here of Trump's latest reasoning here? I'm going to play these two right back to back here.
They would have opened it up 3 days ago. They came to us and they said, we will agree to open the strait. And all my people were happy. Everybody was happy except me.
Yes, I remember that. Then you decided not to lift your own blockade, and that all disappeared.
I said, wait a minute, if we open the strait, that means they're going to make $500 million a day. I don't want them to make $500 million a day until they settle this thing. So I'm not.
Not wanting them to make $500 million a day, that might have been a good approach if you'd done it right after bombing the Supreme Leader. Day one. If you'd had this naval blockade ready to go when you bombed the Supreme Leader. That might have been smart. That means, you would have already put a month and a half pressure on Iran, not letting any of their ships through, and you'd have leverage. But instead of that, you let Iran blockade the rest of the world for a month and a half, while they wrecked in record profits from the high oil prices because they were still trading oil. So since they were exporting records amount at records price, you basically gave them 3 months of oil sales in a month and a half. Then you decide to impose the blockade. It's when they're already rolling in cash. Yeah, it's not very effective.
I'm the one that kept it closed. We have total control of it. And it'll open when they make a deal or something else happens that's very positive.
All right. So Trump.
And in terms of who's putting more economic pressure on who, Iran has blockaded the rest of the world in terms of oil for now over a month and a half, nearly 2 months. Well, we have 1 week of pressure on Iran. We're losing the battle of economic pressure by a landslide.
Claiming credit, saying he's the one that kept it closed. And then we also have another shot here.
I have to imagine that he's lying. He's not saying the truth, because if he's saying the truth, it's just so stupid. If he actually thought that this was a good strategy to do the blockade, he should have done it day one. Not now. So I think he's just saying whatever, because everything has to be his idea. In any case, it's stupid. If Iran is actually willing to open the Strait of Hormuz, if we lift the blockade, then we should lift the blockade. Because their path to victory is through economic pain, through the Straits of Hormuz closing. That's how they'll get you impeached, Trump. That is, I've said it. 6 months, Strait of Hormuz closed, they automatically win. Guaranteed win. Less than that, the closer you get to that, the more likely they obtain their goal, which is regime change in America. Democrats win the midterms, Trump is impeached. And who knows, they might have already, just this 2 months of Strait of Hormuz closing might already be enough for that. But the longer straits remain closed, the more guaranteed Democrats win the midterms and Trump gets impeached.
Here, where he talks a little bit about Vietnam. Let's take a listen.
How long are you willing to wait until you get a unified response?
Don't rush me, Jeff.
Don't rush me. Don't rush me. Yes, forever wars that you don't rush, like Afghanistan, 10, 20 years, Iraq.
Guys like you want to say, oh,
good Lord.
I'm for 18 years. We're in Iraq for many, many years. We're in for I don't like to say World War II because that was a biggie, but we were 4.5, almost 5 years in World War II. We were in the Korean War for 7 years. I've been doing this for...
Yes, but your experience and how long you've been doing this doesn't matter, because all those wars were different than this current war. This current war has the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, which is wrecking the global economy. I said 6 months and the global economy's toast. We're talking about years. A year of the Strait of Hormuz closed. Oh my God, we're in depression territory. Depression with inflation. Horrible. So we don't have that type of time, Mr. Trump. The economy might already be fucked just with these 2 months of the Strait of Hormuz closed. And if you don't get that, I'm sure you must be beginning to, because someone around you has got to be telling you how much damage the Strait of Hormuz is doing to the world economy.
6 weeks. And their military is totally defeated.
7 weeks, Mr. President.
They're outside of the little wise guy ships. I call them the wise guy ships, the little boats that they have running
Yeah. The Navy you claim to have completely wiped out. Yes, they still have ships.
around with guns in them. We'll take them out too when we see them.
I believe the estimate that was posted from CBS News of how much of the Iranian naval capacity remains is somewhere around 60%. So that's, and again, from CBS News, Trump regime propaganda.
There are tunnels, miles of tunnels filled with speedboats. And those are still all ready to go. They could be put out at any time and can attack tankers. With enough of them, they can do a rush at a warship, and they're equipped with weapons. They could take one out with enough of them.
Outlet. I mean, there's so much you could say here on the calculation about the blockade of the blockade. First of all, it's not true that it's completely closed. There's, evidence that a number of ships have been able to get through, although at a diminished rate. So that is certainly the case. But he seems to be calculating that economic stress on Iran will squeeze them to a greater extent than it will squeeze us.
Which isn't the case. They've just had a month and a half of exporting more oil than they usually do at twice or more than normal price. So they've had just 3 months of oil exports, the cash from that, in a month and a half. They have extra cash. They're not going to starve immediately if you shut them out. If you had done this blockade day one of the war and prevented Iran from selling records amount of oil at records prices for a month and a half, then you'd have a huge amount of leverage because they not only have damage from the war, but they would have no extra income. Yeah, they'd be much worse position, and it might have actually been a pressure point if you'd done this blockade day one.
And by the numbers, that may be true, but their public is much more willing and able to withstand economic pain. I mean, they're used to sanctions. This is existential for them.
True. Even if you had done it day one, I don't. It's not guaranteed it would have worked, but it would have applied more pressure in terms of negotiations and everything than doing it week 7 or week 6. Sorry, he started his embargo week 6.
Is. And so that is the Iranian calculation, is that is not remotely the case. And that every day that the economic warfare continues, whether the hot war continues or not, that is a day in which their leverage is increased and our capacity to continue on is decreased. So I think that is their logic. And I'll just say, one more thing.
Yes, this ceasefire is working. The Iranian position is getting stronger every day of this ceasefire because the Strait of Hormuz remained closed. A ceasefire with Strait of Hormuz open, then that's neutral, or maybe slightly in the U.S.'s favor, because the economic pressure of on the global oil market would be gone if the Strait of Hormuz is open. So that might be a tiny bit in the United States' favor. But right now, we're not in that situation. There's a double blockade on the Strait of Hormuz.
On that economic blockade piece, there was a note in a Financial Times article that this was J.D. Vance's thinking after he left the failed talks, that he was telling people, like, listen, we'll put this blockade on and this will be so difficult for them that they'll be back at the table ready to negotiate in no time.
I'm praying that's not the case, because if so, Vance is an idiot. This should have been done day one, or it's practically not worth doing at all. Not after you give them a month and a half of huge oil revenue that I'm sure they've saved up some of that, so they're not going to be short of cash anytime soon because of how much we let them export during the first part of the war.
It's hard for me to believe that he's dumb enough to actually think that that's the case, but if that is truly wild, that they still misunderstand and underestimate this adversary to that extent.
Yep.
Yeah,
I'm not sure I think it's an intentional misunderstanding. They're viewing Iran through the lens of wishful thinking. They need a victory, and maybe this could work. Possibly, they might think it has very low chance of working, but they need a victory. And if it has 1% chance of working, they'll figure they'll try that, because defeat his political end of the Trump administration.
Harming the economy, to your point, isn't really going to do it because we've been hurting their economy for decades now at this point.
Yes,
The
we have.
real strategic aim seems to be to basically shut down their petroleum, their oil industry.
It might also be to put pressure on China, and China can then put pressure on Iran. That might actually be the one strategic thinking that makes sense, because these talks to begin with were due to pressure from China. And if Iran can still export its own oil to China, well, in that scenario, China is perfectly happy with oil from Russia and Iran. That's enough for it to satisfy its own domestic economy, and the benefits from this Iran war, in terms of how much it hurts the United States, outweigh any pain. If you choke off Iranian oil for China, that might change the dynamics. It might start to put pressure on China too. And China would then put pressure on Iran, according to U.S. thinking, and that would help with U.S. negotiations. But even if that's true, Iran is not going to surrender, and China is not going to demand Iran surrender to the United States. So Trump getting the victory he wants, even this scenario, it won't happen.
Which they could do by, if all of their oil tankers and storage facilities get filled up and they can't then, move any, more oil out, then they have to shut down the entire.
Thing is, that won't happen. That won't happen. All the Iranian oil filling up, China won't allow it. Won't allow Iranian oil facilities to shut down. They are sending their warships already. And before Iranian oil storage all fills up, you're going to have convoys of oil from Iran to China being escorted by Chinese warships. And I don't think the United States is going to try to stop that. So we're temporarily stopping some Iranian exports. But China is not going to let a scenario where they let Iran's oil storage all fill up and they're forced to shut down production. China won't allow that.
System, and that is like extraordinarily damaging to it. And it's very expensive. Getting it back up can take months. It's a complete mess. But
which is why China won't allow it, because if Iran is forced to shut down production, yes, it takes its production offline for months, and Iran is China's ally and greatest source for really cheap crude oil. They're not going to let that happen. They're not going to allow that to be lost because of a U.S. blockade. Fuck that. How dare the United States try to cut off Iranian oil from China? They'll send warships to escort tankers. Mark my word.
Analysts differ on how long that would take, but it would take a significant amount of time, at least 4 weeks, maybe 8.
Plenty of time for Chinese destroyers and other warships to make their way to the region, which I hear they're already on their way.
8, maybe longer. And so then the question is, does the U.S. and the global economy have that amount of time? Like Lufthansa just canceled, 20,000 flights the other day because they don't have oil. Bangladesh has just announced this morning its central bank is out of money because costs for everything are going up. So you're going to start seeing these cascading collapses of sectors, countries, industries, companies. And
Contagion.
So can the West, and not just the West, but the whole world, withstand 8 more weeks of this? I doubt it. And also,
it would be, by the way, at the end of this month, the amount of crude loss will have been from the world economy will have been greater than 1973 oil embargo that spiked crises around the world. Yes, another 6 weeks of this will be far beyond that. And by then, that 6 weeks from now, the full economic pain from this war will be felt around the world.
Also, if they can get some tankers through, then they can buy themselves even more time. But meanwhile, they're sending mixed signals. Griffin, I have this Hegseth thing from.
They're floundering. They have no good options. Surrender to Iran. That's the administration's finished. Keep twiddling your thumbs like they're doing now, basically, with the ceasefire and nothing really happening anywhere. That's world economy slowly dying, and The administration is finished in like a month or two. And then the third one is escalate, and then Middle East goes up in flame, and the administration is finished. All options lead to a Trump defeat and a U.S. defeat. The only good move was not to start the war.
I believe it was this morning, which is kind of contradictory to what Trump is saying. Let me play this here.
Be America's fight alone. We barely use the Strait of Hormuz as a country. Our energy doesn't flow through there.
Yes, but we get all of our manufactured goods from elsewhere in the world practically. We have no industrial base. Everything we get, we import. And do you know who we import a lot of it from, or most of it from? Southeast Asia. And you know where Southeast Asia gets its oil? The Gulf of Persia. So we're going to be impacted. Just because it's not direct, just because it's indirect impact doesn't mean we're not going to feel the full force of it.
And we have plenty of energy. Just look at the new global Congo line headed to Texas. A beautiful picture. Europe and Asia have.
Yes, a beautiful picture of tons of oil tankers coming to the United States to take oil. More tankers than normal. And if you take more oil than normal out of the United States economy, what do you think that does to the prices here in the country? Gas prices go up.
Have benefited from our protection for decades, but the time for free riding is over. America and the free.
So you're going to let the rest of the world take care of it? You're going to dismantle all your bases throughout the region? Are you going to stop funding Israel, the most destabilizing forces in the Middle East? Because, if you're going to let the rest of the world solve the problem, you have to stop being the problem. You have to get out of the way. I think the United States wants to still have control of the Middle East, wants others people to come in and clean up its mess. And that's just arrogant and stupid.
World deserve allies who are capable, who are loyal, and who understand that being an ally is not a one-way street. It's a two-way street. We are not counting on Europe. They need the Strait of Hormuz much more than we do.
Yes, but you're the one with the military bases all over the Middle East. You're in the, or at least you had until Iranian bombed the hell out of all of them. Europe has no presence in the Middle East. You need ports, you need places to resupply. How exactly would you expect Europe, even if it had the Navy to help or the troops to help, to do anything so far off without no logistics set up?
And might want to start doing less talking and having less fancy conferences in Europe and get in a boat.
If you haven't noticed, Europe's currently occupied with this little thing called Ukraine, fighting a superpower, Russia. Yeah, they sort of have their hands tied. Just might point that out.
This is much more their fight than ours.
Their fight is Ukraine.
So stop it with your baguettes and pick up a bazooka. Get in the water. So Trump, we're going to blockade this thing. Hegseth, actually, this is your problem. Fox News, it's the Iranians who are in disarray. Like, our government is in public disarray.
Iranians are doing just fine. Like I said, they're winning. Every day that passes by with Strait of Hormuz closed, they're winning. Why would they be in disarray?
Like, there's no public disarray from the Iranian government. There's alleged internal disarray.
Alleged by Israel. Wishful thinking.
But so if you're the Iranians and you're watching that, you're like, wait, are they going to keep blockading the strait, or is it Europe's problem? Like, what is actually going on here?
He also said Congo line. I believe he meant Congo line.
Congo line, yeah.
Congo line.
Like
and
all
what
their
Trump,
tankers going to Louisiana, yeah.
it's also so. I mean, we don't even need to say this, but it's. Look at Ryan go. I want a gif of that. It's so dishonest to say that because we don't get a lot of our direct energy from the Strait of Hormuz, that it's not going to affect the American economy.
Right.
It's just such a ridiculous point but it is, of course.
Somebody should have told Bush that. Why are you invading Iraq? We've got so much natural gas right here. Stop.
Don't worry.
That was
Uh,
pre the
just-
fracking revolution, though, Ryan.
Okay, yeah,
fairness,
True.
You know.
But he's
True,
just
back during the Iraq War, we were a net importer of oil by a large margin. We were very vulnerable to cutoffs of oil.
like it's actually really similar. I was just going to say actually to what people like Pete Hegseth, who served after 9/11, were saying they detested about the Bush era, which is people getting up in front of a microphone and misleading the American people behind an official government podium about war. And that's like, I know that when Trump is riffing and being like, don't rush me, Jeff, to Jeff Mason, presumably, like he's constantly in now watch this drive mode because he's talked so breezily. It's just completely like he doesn't even have to switch from one to the other. Everything is just easy breezy when he talks about it. Bush.
Yeah, we're just losing this war in style because let's be perfectly clear. Strait of Hormuz closed every day that is, that's the United States losing. Every day that's happening. And Trump is very happy to lose in style, apparently.
She was like switching from we're going to win the war to now watch this drive. And that was jarring for people. But Trump is just like constantly in the now watch this drive mentality. And you can hear it as he's talking about how the Iranian Navy has, what did he say, wise guy boats? The Mosquito fleet that they have prepared for many years for contingencies like this one, which is still creating a lot of trouble for the American Navy trying to implement this blockade. Like that's actually a real issue for the American Navy right now.
And we looked at yesterday, they have begun mining the Strait of Hormuz seriously now. And it'll take 6 months to clear that, even if the war ends today. So as long as there's mines in certain areas of Strait of Hormuz, that'll limit the traffic of ships, even if the war were to end today.
Now, so it's especially I think from Pete Hegseth, who's again served and made this argument about people who were misleading folks into war. It's really kind of gross to hear arguments like that.
Well, I also want to just dwell for a moment on the part that Trump was saying about like, don't rush me. I got all the time in the world.
Yeah.
You know, Vietnam was this long and Iraq was this long and Afghanistan was that long. Keep in mind that number one, he thought this was going to be over after effectively day one. And there was no planning.
The first weekend, he expected it. Yeah, first week, no planning at all whatsoever. They've been planning this oil embargo that Trump had put in. It would have been in place day one if there was planning.
Beyond, we take out the Ayatollah and, a bunch of other top leadership and destroy a bunch of stuff. And then that's it. We find our Delcy Rodriguez and we're out of here. That's what he was telling our allies, is that it would be over in 4 days. Then we were consistently getting this line from the White House to a whole variety of reporters that it would be 4 to 6 weeks. Well, now here we are at 6 weeks. And now he's saying, hey, you remember those forever wars that I ran against and that many people voted for me thinking that I would not be the person to get us in another one of those? Weren't those great? Let's wrap our minds around being here relatively indefinitely.
Don't rush me, he says. Don't rush me. That sounds like a forever war.
I mean, that's an incredible moving of the goalpost right there, and contemplates that there isn't going to be some quick ability.
And I'm sorry for Nick Fuentes and those like him say, we voted for this. No, we didn't. We voted against the forever wars. There was no forever wars in Trump's first term. We expected more of the same, and we got fucking this.
Ability to come up with some deal and wrap this thing in a bow and be able to declare mission accomplished and walk away.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, and Ryan, when does Europe revolt? Are all these countries going?
Next winter. You wanted the answer. Next winter. It's the gas prices. Next winter, which is going to crush Europe. Until then, high gas prices, at the pump, gasoline prices, they already have high taxes. They can lower the tax on gasoline and limit the pain there. But next winter, natural gas, they're not going to have enough. The prices are going to be insane. I mean, like 4 or 5 times what they were this winter, is what I imagine. Because no natural gas from Russia, no natural gas from the Middle East, and U.S. will cut off its supply towards the election. And natural gas, heating gas, next winter is just going to crush Europe. So the answer, next winter.
Going to allow America to essentially crater their economies and just say, oh, I guess it's just America is doing what they're going to do. Like, is there a point where the world comes together and says, actually, no, we got to put this.
But yes, I do expect that 2 months, 3 months before the rest of the world, not just Europe, the rest of the world entirely comes together and forces Trump to basically surrender to Iran. 2-3 months, maybe 4 months if he's really stubborn. If things don't spiral and escalate and the entire world gets fucked, if that worst case scenario can be avoided, somewhere between 2 and 4 months, I'd say from now.
We got to stop this.
I think you're more likely to get serious pressure from some of the Asian countries, who seem to have actually more sense, interestingly, more sense of kind of dignity and sovereignty than the Europeans do.
Yeah, they're also a lot more dependent on oil from the Gulf. So more dependent you are on oil from the Gulf, the more interest you have in twisting Trump's arm to get him to capitulate to Iran. But just like Japan, South Korea, and China, whatever, it won't be enough to pressure Trump. You'll need Europe to join in, and Europe is less vulnerable, or slightly less vulnerable to oil from the Middle East, so it'll take a little bit longer. So 2-4 months, somewhere in there, is when the rest of the world starts really ratcheting up pressure on Trump because their economies are collapsing.
The Europeans feel like they give off a real sense of like hopelessness and haplessness, that they're like, well, this sucks. Hope somebody can do something about this.
Yes, that's what they feel like now, is because right now they're only seeing the economic pain on the horizon. Like Europe still has 6 weeks of jet fuel left. So they see the end 6 weeks from now. That's going to be a disaster, but they're not at the disaster yet. Once they arrive at the disaster, once that 6 weeks jet fuel is gone, then the pain starts. And then the pain is just as bad as they fear, and their economies start collapsing. Then they're like, we need to pressure Trump. And the entire world panics, whatever, and tells Trump, you need to surrender to Iran. And we might have an end to this because Trump is forced to capitulate.
Whereas some of the Asian countries are like
They're the
starting
Democrats of the world.
Yeah, they are. They really are. Like
The Chuck
they're-
Schumers.
they're-
But no one is going to pressure Trump until after the pain starts. That's why there's a sense of hopelessness, because they know exactly how bad it's going to be, but until the actual pain starts, there won't be the political will to tell Trump, fuck you, surrender to Iran.
The
all
world.
the Democrats. Yes.
I will agree.
Yeah.
Well, so they'll do a global kneeling with a kente cloth, but they're not going to put any limits on this. Well, while we talked about Pete Hegseth, we do have another clip from our friends at TMZ that Crystal wanted to throw to really quickly. Why don't we take a listen?
I would encourage other countries to be a part of such an effort as well, but we're tracking that very closely. Mr. Chairman, you want to add anything to that?
No, sir. I think you covered it.
Right here, new members of our press corps here.
And the reason why I say the rest of the world is going to pressure Trump and not Iran is because they have no leverage on Iran. And Iran has just had its supreme leader killed, and it is an existential fight. It's not the one who started the war. So it's clear that the United States, the one who started all this, they're the ones who's going to have to surrender. Number one. Number two, the rest of the world does have leverage over the United States. The rest of the world combined, like decides to sanction the United States or do something economically to the United States. United States is a superpower, but it can't stand up to the rest of the world united against it. And Trump would have to be forced to capitulate. But we need a lot more pain, because once everyone gets desperate, then you need probably a couple of weeks for the rest of the world to organize a united front against Trump to force him to give in. And they'll target United. Yeah, it would work. Just the rest of the world has no leverage over Iran. Iran's already heavily sanctioned. You can't sanction someone you've already sanctioned. But you can. The rest of the world has not sanctioned the United States. They do have leverage over the United States.
Jacob Wasserman with TMZ DC. We have two questions. I'm going to ask the first. My colleague will ask the second. I've heard you talk a lot about.
We'll see.
Okay. I've heard you talk a lot about bombing people and places. And when you give these orders to carry out this extreme level of violence, what's going through your mind and your body? Do you have like an adrenaline rush? Are you scared?
I care absolutely little about what this guy thinks. He is an idiot that got us into this war. And judging by the tattoos that he sports, he is. And the reports I hear about him leading forced prayer sessions at the Pentagon and White House. Yeah, he's a nut job. Let's move on.
Let's move over to some things happening in our.
This is not directly related to the Iran war, but it's part of the global economic picture, or at least the U.S. economic picture. So,
country currently. Emily, we've got some economy news and some layoffs. What do we got?
We'll start by saying markets have been open for about an hour as we're talking right now. The S&P 500 is up. So I'm sure that's great news to everybody over in the White House. But a couple of big layoff announcements that we wanted to cover. We can start with this Meta announcement. Meta is going to cut 10% of its workforce, according to a New York Times story. That's 8,000 employees. They're going to close an additional 6,000 roles that were open. And they're in the process of, obviously, as the Times points out, spending heavily on AI. So going basically pedal to the metal on artificial intelligence. Another one to cover here is Nike is announcing about 14.
We watched a video a while back about AI being less good that a lot of people report, and about a lot of companies backtracking after going with AI because it hallucinates. AIs hallucinate like 10% of their answers. And that can wreak all types of havoc. I'm sure there's some stuff that you can replace with AI, but I can't help but suspect that some of these countries are going overboard with their firings.
1,500 layoffs. That's 2% of the entire company. It comes out to about 2% of the entire company. Shael Ben Ephraim had a roundup, so that we can also pop on the screen, Griffin, of Nike, Meta, also Microsoft offering voluntary retirement buyouts to about 7% of its U.S. workforce. Another company that is going pedal to the metal on artificial intelligence. Oracle has an AI-driven layoff between 20,000 to 30,000 employees getting cut. Again, that's as they're going pedal to the metal on AI. Amazon, 16,000 jobs cut at the corporate level back in January. Many people will probably remember that. They had recently cut about 14,000, as Shael points out, just a couple of months earlier at the end of last year. Block, massive cuts from Jack Dorsey, as they were ones that were basically citing AI. They're the ones that were kind of brave.
Lots of layoffs.
Enough to actually cite AI. Dell cut about 11,000 jobs over the last year. So it's, the analyses of why we're starting to see mass layoffs are a little bit mixed. A lot of experts look at that and say...
And all of these are happening at a time where fuel prices are exploding and inflation is exploding. And this job market is going to worsen because of the Iran war. Companies hurt by fuel prices will lay off. And I'd hate to have to go out and try to find a job in this economic setup. It's horrible.
What we've seen so far is reaction to a super uncertain economy. So we have Ukraine, now we have Iran, but in the process, we've also had tariffs over the last year as well. And so there has been just an enormous amount of uncertainty. Now, the Mag 7 companies are over 30% of the S&P. So just think about that, 30% of the S&P. And a lot of them are these companies that we were just talking about. So they're cutting tons of jobs. This is the sign that we are now, I think...
Or AI companies. You know what AI companies rely on? Energy a lot, electricity. And electricity prices are going to go up because of Iran. So the AI is definitely a bubble. When that bursts, oh boy.
On the cusp of the economy not just being a reaction to uncertainty, but actually being a direct reaction to artificial intelligence. And this is as, of course, a lot of those entry-level workers, entry-level white-collar workers, are graduating college in the spring. Just in the next 3 weeks here, there have been projections. We're going to see historic levels of unemployment for recent college graduates. This should prepare people for that to prove accurate in the next several weeks. Unfortunately, that's really where we are.
Yeah, and one of the points Shael makes there that is very important and matches with your analysis of where the market is at this morning is he's like, we're kind of used to when companies are doing mass layoffs, it's because those companies aren't doing well, so they've got to cut costs, they've got to trim back, and they would
not the case this time. This kind of time is AI displacing workers.
Like to keep those workers theoretically, but they're unable to. That's kind of the landscape that we're used to. But these are companies that are all doing very well, have high profit margins, but their stock will go up from cutting this workforce. And this is the terrifying logic of AI is as
the richest 1% will get richer and everyone else will get poorer.
Companies implement it and eliminate large swaths of their workforce, the overall public will be worse and worse off. But the, top echelons of those companies and their, and their CEOs and their top shareholders will be better and better off. So the level of inequality that we have right now is already world historic, and certainly historic in terms of our nation.
Because we're the end stage of a Ponzi scheme, U.S. Financial system. When that Ponzi scheme goes down, all that richest 1% that has all their money invested in the Ponzi scheme, let's say the richest 1% won't be holding as much of the wealth anymore.
History, it's at its highest levels ever. That is set to skyrocket.
But that's like 5 years or more away.
With the logic of AI, where yes, the stock market may continue to go up and up. And rather than being even correlated to the general success and well-being of the American people, it will be an inverse correlation, where the higher the stock market goes up, the worse ordinary people are actually faring.
And that's scary because of what a bubble it shows that we're under right now. Like, to Crystal's point, if something goes wrong and people start realizing there's also a lot of circular funding in the Mag 7 world and AI world in general.
Yes, AI companies invest in other AI companies, invest in other, circular funding type deals. And anyone start withdrawing that funding, you need everyone blowing into it for a bubble to expand. If some people start sucking out the bubble.
Also, if somebody realizes one investment is looking worse than they expected and starts pulling back a little bit and the bubble starts to pop, we're literally talking about 35% of the S&P.
And if Strait of Hormuz remains closed, it's going to pop the AI bubble for sure, because of just energy costs. And these data centers rely on energy.
The risks of this big AI project and expansion, inflation, are really significant and actually pretty frightening, Ryan.
Yeah, we are rapidly approaching, very dark territory. Because the incentives are awful. Companies are always looking to shed their workforce so that they can boost their stock price, so that they can then, send out dividends to executives. Executives can then, cash out and move on to the next company and do it again. It's like, it's a system designed for looting by executives, and AI is becoming the scooper, the vehicle, the weapon that they're going to do this looting with. And you can say, well, even for
it's a system designed for the Epstein class. That's what it is.
The AI skeptics are like, I don't actually think it's going to work. They don't care. Like, they will lay off these workforces, take the stock price bump, take their dividends, and then move on. People keep thinking that whether something will actually work matters. What matters is whether it's useful to extract wealth up to the very top. And this is, and so that's the way it's going to go.
I mean, there's a direct tie-in. Go ahead, Em.
Well, I was just saying, nobody basically went to prison after the Great Recession, partially because a lot of this is legal, but some of it is dubious.
Oh, she's talking about the 2008, the Great Recession. Well, the reason no one went to jail during the Great Recession is because no one on Wall Street was responsible for the 2008 financial crisis. I covered that. It's regulators, U.S. regulators, were the ones who created the subprime market that wrecked the global economy in 2008. And everything you've heard in the media about Wall Street greed being responsible for the 2008 financial crisis, it's all bullshit. It is one of the biggest lies the media has told in the last 2 decades.
Yes, anyway, so what are the incentives for people not to engage in this stuff if they know they're going to be fine? They'll get a payday.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And they've all convinced themselves too that it's this existential battle for whoever reaches AGI first. And that creates the worst incentives to rush things that are genuinely dangerous to the market. We talked yesterday about Mythos, which is No,
I believe the current approach to AI, it won't ever produce human level intelligence. I'm not going to go into why I believe that, but yeah, just where they figured out one of the basics to human level intelligence, which is neural networks and seeing patterns. That's one of the blocks you need to make it a human level AI, but it isn't the only one. And given they're basically everything they're doing now is still focusing on refining neural networks and improving neural networks, it's not the right approach. You need something completely different than that for the other part of creating human level AI. I won't get into that now.
the Anthropic product that they deemed to be too dangerous to release to the public. But there was a report that a group of hackers were able to gain unauthorized access to that anyway. So clearly it was being kept under lock and key, but not lock and key enough to keep out. And so if they were able to gain access, who else was able to gain access? I mean, this is already the world that we're living in. And there is a direct tie in potential impacts from the Iran war that go in a few directions. I mean, first of all, you've got the Gulf economies that are going to be really hard hit. They're already pulling back all sorts of investments. I saw Saudi Arabia is pulling an investment from like the Met Opera, just as another indication. They're pulling their investment from Live Gulf, and a lot of what they were investing in was these data centers and AI in a attempt to diversify their economies. So that could be significant. You also have these data centers really depend on relatively inexpensive energy. Obviously, the Iran war is creating an energy crunch, so that could be significant in terms of the build out. You've obviously also got the grassroots backlash that we've been tracking here, trying to slow down the build out of these data centers. But the other piece is with the Iran war, the reality is that the race with China for who can get the furthest, the fastest with AI is very perilous for humanity in the same way that the nuclear arms race between the Soviet Union and the US was very perilous for humanity.
At least I have comfortable in knowing that the current direction that they're taking with AI, it'll create, the AIs will be powerful, but there will be a missing component. And with that missing component, I'm not too worried of them actually, gaining consciousness or being human level anytime soon.
Well, speaking of
This I find infuriating, and it's worth going in every once in a while to some of the shit Israel is doing.
negotiations, they've extended this Israel-Lebanon ceasefire, but meanwhile, Israel continues to fire. There was a triple tap on a journalist, Amal Khalil.
Triple tap. That means they try to kill him once, try to kill him twice, then try to kill him a third time, just to make sure.
Ryan, why don't you tell us a little bit about that? Because you probably won't be hearing about this on CNN or any other news organization.
Which is the problem. Reason Israel acts the way it does is because it knows that things like it that are in this video do not get wide coverage. Nearly every major problem in our economy, in our society, has to do with media's failure to do fulfill the role it's supposed to, inform the public of what is relative, what they should know. And this is one of the things that the U.S. public should know.
Let me pull up.
I've got a video of her.
Yeah, if you want to play that, and then later I can put up the drop site story that Jeremy did for us. Yeah, you want to play this?
Yeah. We just got the video.
Oh, yeah. So Amal Khalil she was a prominent Lebanese reporter for Al Akbar and Lebanese outfit, and she with a number of other journalists was in southern Lebanon reporting. The car that was driving in front of her and her colleague was struck by an Israeli drone. They were injured in that blast. They were able to get out of the car.
Yeah, it's just terrible. Israel purposely targeting someone who's obviously a journalist.
And run into an abandoned home right nearby, from which they called. They were calling all of their friends and colleagues, saying we're being fired on. We need help. We need we're hurt. We need to get out of here. The entire country and world that was paying attention was following this, and the Lebanese the prime minister, the president, was publicly begging Israel to stop shooting at her. So the Red Cross publicly was saying, we are right here. We are right next to the home. We need to go in and rescue these women. Please stop firing at us and stop firing at the home. And they wouldn't. And so the Red Cross left, and
batshit insane.
After hours of this,
7 hours.
Israel bombed the house.
As Nuck would say, diabolical.
And killed her. And eventually, the Red Cross was able to get in under intense fire and pull.
This is one of those stories you won't hear from Nuxtaku, unfortunately, because he does have his bias.
out her colleague who was alive, but she was still stuck under the rubble, and the medics had to evacuate before they could get her out because the Israelis were, continuing to fire. Insanely, she had been getting threats, like leading right up to that, death threats, and they posted the number that was threatening her.
Lebanese journalist Amal Khalil bombed and left to die by Israel.
So one of our correspondents, who was in southern Lebanon for us maybe 6 months or a year ago, Jeremy Lafredo, he texted that number, and let me find. People should read his story if they get a chance. But so here he said, "Hi, my name is Jeremy Lafredo. I'm a journalist for the American publication Dropsite News, and I'm wondering if you have any comment on the threat you sent to Lebanese journalist Amal Khalil. These are not innocent people. The journalists affiliated with Hezbollah that Israel eliminated were also spies for Hezbollah, approaching our soldiers and then informing the..."
Notice no evidence. Just, of course, you can just make every batshit stuff up you want. Oh, this tweet, any links to any evidence or any... No, it's just... You know what this journalist was doing? They were reporting the truth of what's going on in Lebanon, and the truth makes Israel look very bad. And that makes them on Hezbollah's side. If they report stuff that makes Israel look bad, then they must be allied with Hezbollah. And so we can kill them. You see the logic? It's flawless, right? It's Nuxtaku logic. Because Nuxtaku just gives up on logic when it comes to Israel.
A terrorist organization where our soldiers were in real time. Similarly, on October 7th, journalists affiliated with Hamas were eliminated because they were intelligence officers. Send greetings to all journalists affiliated with Hezbollah, for anyone who works for the organization.
Yeah, because... Yeah, I'm being absolutely serious. These type of people in Israel, the way they decide someone's affiliated with Hezbollah is if they report anything that makes Israel look bad. Because that must be... It's a media war, and if you report something that makes Israel look bad, then you are a Hezbollah ally. Even if you have no contact whatsoever with Hezbollah. And even if you hate Hezbollah, if you report negatively on Israel, they deem you associated with Hezbollah and they're allowed to kill you.
Nation should know they are destined for death. He then adds, I think about the possibility that you are one of them too. I'm offering you to find another partner in Lebanon. There are a lot of good people over there. Maronites, Sunnis, Druze, and others try to cover their narrative. You are naive, very naive, and then some weird emoji.
Yeah, he seems heartbroken about this journalist killed, right?
So this is basically a threat.
Yeah,
it is. It is.
So threatening Jeremy as well. Noah Hurwitz reached out, and the guy told him his name. Before we finish the segment, I can find the guy's name, but we know the guy's actual name. And nothing is going to be done.
And the reason that guy, right there, who's openly calling to kill innocent people, innocent journalists, reason he's so confident in that is because he knows he has media protection. The U.S. media won't cover this story. If you had all of U.S. media, Fox, CNN, all covering this story the way these guys covered the story about what they did to this journalist, you'd have outrage. You'd have whoever orders this strike on this journalist jailed in Israel just because of the pressure. You'd have this guy who threatened the journalist. He'd be jailed too, or he'd be outed or fired at the very least. There'd be consequences, but there are no consequences. And the no consequences is because we don't have a functioning media that covers what it should cover.
Done to this guy, or
is this like a guy in the government? Like, who is this guy?
I mean, it's the same confidence that you see in the Epstein emails, where he's openly talking about torture chamber and pizza parties, and he's sending these emails from his own personal email as though he doesn't have a concern in the world that people might find out. And there was a reason for him to be confident back then. Look what happened with John Podesta. Emails leak. Media does everything in its power to cover it up and to say, oh, Pizzagate is nonsense. Yeah, when you have the entire media that you know has your back and won't cover any of your wrongdoings, you could just become very brazen with what with your actions. Emailing from your private account without fear. This guy emailing threats to journalists without fear. It's because we don't have a functioning media.
Guy. Is he a troll?
He's like a pro-war writer, like affiliated with the like pro-war. Well, they're all pro-war. Let me.
So this is
find
like
it.
a Fox. This is like a Fox News guy
Yeah,
DMing
one of
you
these-
that
it's
he's
one-
going to
one of
drone
these
strike you.
One of these people who's like affiliated, not affiliated with the government.
Gotcha.
That's sort of like a mouthpiece for it. Yeah, like utterly like just a murder of these unarmed journalists. Like that, and like
It had nothing to do with keeping the Israelis safe, murdering these journalists. It's about journalists that did reporting that made Israel look bad and silencing those journalists.
it's not even serious. Like she's in her own country, first of all. So like, even if she was reporting on where the Israeli troops are, which that's what journalists do, they'll say
It
like,
is.
this is where the battle is happening, and they tell the public where the battles are happening. But even if that's true, they're in her country. So, like, can you imagine the gall there to like invade somebody else's country and then kill the reporters in that country for reporting on the fact that you're in that country?
Yep.
Um,
It's wild.
it's just such an unbelievable. Okay, just an unbelievable crime. All right, let's see. Here's Noah. Let me see.
Ryan, do you suspect that because we've seen people be targeted based on these sort of like not affiliated, sort of affiliated accounts and like propagandistic allies? Do you suspect there's a direct connection between these threats and the murder?
Yes, I do think so. Especially tracking all of the other journalists who've been killed, Palestinian journalists who've been killed in Gaza. These kinds of threats always foreshadow an assassination. That you can map it. That's why we were so pressed to get Abu Bakr Abed out of Gaza, because all of a sudden these
He was
types of
getting these
people
threats.
started making these threats privately and publicly. And that
Sort of like
and-
when Laura Loomer starts tweeting about someone who needs to be deported or fired or
Right.
whatever. I mean,
Right.
Israel finds out someone's doing a journalism in the places they're doing wrongdoings. Next step, threaten them. And if they don't run away right away, like this guy did apparently, then you bomb them and kill them.
And so the guy said his name was Gideon Gal Ben Abraham.
so just no shame. Happy to respond to the text, tell you his identity.
Yeah.
Feels like
Also,
he can
also
act
the
with
same
complete-
as
Yep. That confidence with the belief that mainstream media around the world will just not cover the story.
impunity.
also the same as Rafat Al-Arir story. You know, he
Mhm.
started getting lots
That's
of DMs in the same ways. And I guess, you know, Rafat wasn't press, but it does seem like these press badges are turning into more like bullseye targets. More, you know, like
It's basically press, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Yes, they threatened him. They were very clear they were going to try to kill him.
Out of any country, Israel is the most aggressive in killing journalists by far.
Then they do this crazy thing. They called her, and told her they were going to kill her. Like, and that's a very common thing. Like, you'd be surprised, but like Rafat got calls as well from Israeli military officials. And there's no utility in calling them unless you're trying to like make sure that maybe they're making sure that the phone that they've been tracking is actually them. So that
Yeah.
could be the surveillance utility of it. But otherwise, it's just sadistic. It's just,
Just part of the terror campaign.
and last week, they called a journalist. I don't know if you saw this story, and said, "We're going to kill you immediately. You can either die with your family, or you can run, and we will kill you alone." And he said, "I'm going to run." And so he fled his house, got into his car, and they hit him very quickly with a drone strike in his car and burned him alive. And there's like video of some of this unfolding. There had been a lot of stories of this happening before. People saying, you know, the Israelis calling ahead of time. So they called and said, "We're going to kill you." And it undercuts the idea that there is such a thing as a human shield, because if he said, "I'm not leaving this house," those
Yeah, Israel would have bombed the house, killed the family too. They don't give a fuck about human shields.
other humans are not a shield. Like they
would have thought
bomb the
nothing of murdering them as well.
And Crystal, this from Haaretz, Israeli soldiers testified of widespread looting in Lebanon. Commanders know and do nothing. So it seems like they're just totally picking the entire southern Lebanon for scraps as they bomb and destroy villages. Do you think this is going to have a major
I don't have a high opinion of the IDF.
effect on the talks? I know that Iran was trying to say, hey, if there's no ceasefire in
Let me-
Lebanon.
Here, I found who this guy is. Let's just wrap that
All
up.
right, let's do it.
So we don't leave it hanging. So this is from Noah, who he said this guy Gal Gideon Ben Abraham told Noah this is who he was. We don't know if that's true, but this is what the number said he was. He's an Israeli commentator who has a number of YouTube videos speaking on issues around the genocide in Gaza and wars in Lebanon and Iran. I've not yet independently verified that this account belongs to him. So he's an Israeli. He's like an Israeli commentator, basically.
Awesome. But yeah, I mean, Crystal, how does this carnage in Lebanon affect any potential deal in the future?
By the way, what exactly can a reporter working for Hezbollah do exactly? She's not fighting. She's not using weapons. And Israel shoots any reporters that come near their forces anyway, so it's not like she can give them any real intelligence. What exactly are they accusing her of doing? Just reporting things that make Israel look bad? It's such a joke.
I mean, the Iranians have been very clear that, if there is a true return to just bombardment in Lebanon, that is going to be unacceptable to them. It was after the ceasefire was brokered between Israel and Lebanon that Arachi tweeted out, okay, the strait is open because this Lebanon ceasefire has been secured. So this has always been very central to them. They are very unified in this demand. So I think it's extremely important. There's also reporting coming out of Israeli outlets that Israel is preparing to go back to war. Obviously, Israel wants to go back to war. There were significant meetings at the White House yesterday, so we don't know what the next plans are. But if I could just say, one thing specifically about this report of widespread.
You're wondering why Israel is doing this. And when it seems ultimately suicidal to turn so much of the world against them in the way that they have. One reason is they're still operating in the same way they always have. They've always operated this way. It's not changed or anything. What's changed is the media landscape. Now we have a robust alternative media, so streamers via shows like this that cover things, and the truth is getting out in ways it never did before. So even though Israel is acting the same way it always has, its actions are being seen in new light by a huge number of people, and that's turning the world against them. And they haven't adapted to that reality yet. The other reason is because of the whole way the deep state operates and has been operating. I'm talking worldwide, globalists, whatever you want to call them, and Israel is definitely part of that. Like, for example, war with Ukraine. There's a grand strategy in that there's enemies and you just attack those enemies till they're dead, basically. Enemies that are, like, for example, against the U.S. hegemony, against the dollar, like Russia, like Iran. And you just put pressure on them in every way you can until they collapse and fold and are defeated. And that's worked. All for the last, the last 80 years, that's worked. With the U.S. superpower, economic pressure from the CIA covertly, sometimes military power, direct attacks like the war in Iraq. Yeah, it's always worked. The deep state, the globalist, the unipolar world, whatever, has always won in the past. What is happening now is U.S. empire is reaching its waning days. All its instruments of power are worn down and less effective. And take Ukraine, where Ukraine is losing badly to Russia. There's no thinking, well, this is not working. We need to change. We need to change approach and have peace with Russia. That isn't even an option. There's just thinking, how can we put more pressure on Russia? That's why Europe is escalating and making drones and sending drones from NATO airspace into Russia, is because there's no stopping. There's no, okay, we've lost this war. Let's think about it and maybe choose a different approach. That doesn't happen. Same thing with Israel. It's the idea that if we continue this track, we'll completely lose. The rest of the world will turn against us at the end of the state of Israel. That thinking isn't even there. It's just their enemies, pursue them until you get the greater Israel. It's just that one-track mind is how it's worked all along. And it's not going to change now just because the world has changed and now there's a functioning alternative media. And alternative media, maybe half, it's grown. It has influence now. It's reaching a lot of people. But the mainstream is still there. The mainstream media still needs to do a lot more dying before this is all over. But so yes, and Trump with Iran. It may seem like I've been saying attacking Iran was just suicidal, but this just one-track mind. And the reason it's this one-track mind is because the deep state doesn't have one central authority. It has a heart, Treasury's Exchange Stabilization Fund, but most of its power is wielded through outside branches like the Israel lobby in Israel and the EU, another huge branch of the power of the U.S. deep state. And these branches aren't part of the inner circle. They have inertia. They can't suddenly tell, okay, Israel, now for the U.S. hegemony, you need to sort of give up the idea of greater Israel or it's going to be bad. You can't do that. The deep state can't do that. It's the idea of greater Israel is ingrained in the whole world system right now, and Israel's committed to it, and it's going to pursue it until its own destruction.
Right, looting of homes in Lebanon, and there was a video that went, or a picture that went viral of an IDF soldier who had, like, you know, they came in and the village is completely abandoned because, you know, anybody that's left there is assumed to be a terrorist and potentially murdered. And she's going through the garden and plucking out the vegetables that have been planted by this family and preparing this elaborate feast in this family's abandoned kitchen. And I was thinking about something Gideon Levy said, I think actually on Piers Morgan's show, about how you can't have this long-term occupation and subjugation of people without just completely dehumanizing them.
And this isn't new. It's been like that for decades. It's just people are learning more about it today.
And so this behavior is the logical outgrowth of a long-term project of dehumanizing, you know, not just Palestinians, but anyone that they would see as resisting, you know, their project of greater Israel and their need for complete and total security, et cetera. So I think it's a, you know, very...
Yeah, complete and total security means the destruction of everyone else. I mean, if there's no one else around you, then you're completely secure, right? If you're in a town and you're worried about your neighbors might hurt you, you could just murder them all in their sleep. If you murdered everyone else in town, you're safe. No one's around to kill you anymore. Even if they were friendly or whatever, it doesn't matter. If you want perfect security, you just need to kill everyone else.
Very consistent with the behavior we saw of IDF soldiers in Gaza. It is not a one-off. This is part and parcel of what this ideology is.
It's how humans prepare themselves to do mass civilian damage and like just mass warfare in general. The last thing I would say is Steve Sweeney went on Tucker Carlson's show. I think it was last week. He's a journalist for RT, not a place I would work, but nevertheless, he told the story of how he ended up getting targeted, so obviously targeted in Lebanon.
So many journalists have been targeted by Israel. I lose track. Even greater number have been actually killed.
And I just recommend that to everybody because you see how clear he's pressed and you see how clear the attempt on his life was. And that should, I mean, there's basically no way to refute that he was being targeted for being a journalist. So.
All right. So we just wanted to make sure we covered that because, again, you probably will not hear about Amal Khalil on any other major news network.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the...
Yep. It's just a tragedy. Yeah. See, this, according to Israel, is a Hezbollah terrorist and deserving to die. You know, for just reporting. Anyway. This will be on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Come watch on Kick or Twitch. And I'll see you next video. Bye.